For more than a decade now, you've heard the promise of crypto. It's been pitched as a full-blown revolution. But at the very heart of that revolution is one single, incredibly powerful idea: decentralization. Today, we're going to dig into the data and see if that promise is actually holding up. And what we find is a fascinating paradox.
And this is the dream, isn't it? This is the core idea that launched a trillion-dollar industry. The vision of a financial system that's owned by everyone and controlled by no one. That's the whole peer-to-peer electronic cash system that Satoshi Nakamoto talked about.
So, that is the big question. After all the hype, all the money, all the brilliant minds working on this, is the world of crypto actually getting more decentralized? Or is it just slowly rebuilding the exact same systems it promised to get rid of? To answer a question that big, we can't just go with our gut feeling or what the headlines are saying. We need a real way to measure something as abstract as decentralization. And luckily, researchers have actually built a framework to do just that.
So let's get on the same page with a clear definition. When you boil it all down, decentralization really comes down to two simple things. First, how many different people or groups are in the game? And second, is the power spread out evenly among them, or do a few big players call all the shots? Keep that in your head as we go through the data.
Now, to get a clear picture, you can't just look at crypto as one giant monolith. You got to break it down. Researchers analyze these 5 key areas or subsystems, everything from the miners who secure the network, to the exchanges where people trade, all the way to the developers who are actually writing the code. Each one tells a piece of the story.
And you know, when you take that framework and you apply it to the real-world data, the results are not simple at all. In fact, what you find is a huge paradox at the very heart of crypto. The data tells 2 completely different stories at the exact same time.
So let's start with the good news. If you zoom all the way out and look at the big picture, the trend is actually positive. More people are participating, there are more projects, more exchanges. Generally speaking, things are moving in the right direction. The system is spreading out.
But, and this is a huge but, that's where things get tricky. Because the moment you zoom in from that 30,000-foot view, the moment you start looking at the most critical, foundational layers of these systems, a very different, and frankly, a much more worrying picture starts to emerge.
Okay, take Bitcoin's security, the absolute bedrock of the whole network. The original dream was that anybody could be a miner with their laptop. The reality today, a tiny number of huge industrial-scale mining pools now control the vast majority of the network's power.
And then you've got the exchanges. The whole motto was be your own bank, right? But for most people, let's be honest, the exchanges are the new banks. They're the ones holding your funds, they're the ones who can freeze your account, and they're the ones that need all your personal info for KYC checks. We've basically just recreated the old system and slapped a crypto logo on it.
We see the exact same pattern over in the NFT world. For a long time, OpenSea had a near monopoly. Then a big competitor, Blur, showed up. And yeah, sure, adding a second major player technically makes the system more decentralized, but it still leaves the entire market dominated by just 2 giants.
And here's the real kicker, the real irony in all of this. Technologies called Layer 2s were built specifically to help blockchains scale and become more accessible to everyone. But many of the most popular ones right now rely on a single, centralized operator, what's called a sequencer, to order and process all the transactions. It's a single point of failure that was built to solve a decentralization problem. Wild, right?
So that brings us to the most important question. Why? If the whole goal is decentralization, why does everything seem to get sucked back towards a central point? Well, it turns out there are some incredibly powerful forces at play here, almost like gravity.
And it really boils down to 4 main drivers. First, there's simple convenience. People tend to pick the easy button. Then, there are powerful economic incentives baked right into the security models of these systems. There's also a sort of hidden profit engine called MEV that we'll get into. And finally, you have the long arm of government and regulation.
Let's look at the economics for a second. The 2 main security models are proof of work, which Bitcoin uses, and proof of stake, which Ethereum uses. But here's the thing, both of them come with a centralization trade-off. Proof of work requires so much energy and computing power that it leads to those giant mining farms. And in proof of stake, the people who can stake the most coins get the most rewards, which creates this rich-get-richer cycle. Both paths can lead right back to centralization.
All right, now for a concept that's become a massive centralizing force, MEV, or Maximal Extractable Value. Just think of it like this. The people who process transactions can see your trade before it actually goes through.
This lets them jump the line, put their own order in first, and make a profit from the price change your trade is about to cause. It's a huge financial incentive to control how blocks get made. Now, folks are working on fixes, things like proposer-builder separation, but it's a really tough problem to solve.
And we are not talking about small potatoes here. Since late 2020, validators have extracted over $247 million in these kinds of payments. When there's that much money on the table, it creates this intense gravitational pull towards centralizing just to capture it.
So, after looking at the big promise, the hard data, and all these powerful forces pulling things to the center, where does this leave the dream of decentralization? As we've seen, the reality is not simple at all.
The final verdict is, crypto isn't just one thing or the other. It exists in this constant state of tension. It's a paradox. You have different parts of the system becoming more open and distributed, while at the same time other, more critical parts are being pulled right back to the center.
You can really think of it as a constant tug of war. On one side of the rope, you have the powerful ideal of decentralization, pulling for open, permissionless systems. And on the other side, you have the immense gravity of convenience, profit, and real-world regulation pulling it right back.
And this really gets to the heart of it. Maybe that initial promise was a little bit flawed. Maybe decentralization was never supposed to be a finish line you could cross. Maybe it's just a constant, relentless fight against these incredibly powerful, centralizing forces.
Which leaves us with the ultimate question for the future of this whole experiment. The forces pulling everything to the center are powerful, they're predictable, and they are very profitable. The fight for decentralization is difficult, it's messy, and it's ongoing. The question is, which side is ultimately going to win?